Hello there, you're watching the press preview. Our first look at what's on the front pages as they come in. Over the next half an hour, we're going to be talking about the headlines with political journalist Isabel Oakeshott and Evening Standard columnist Ayesha Hazarika. So good evening to both of you.
Hello.
So let's take a look then at the front pages. And the Commons has paid out a total of £2.4 million to gag Westminster staff under 53 gagging orders. That's according to the Eye. Airbus prepares to take flight is the headline on The Times. The paper claims the aerospace company is to pull out of the UK after losing patience with Brexit negotiations. But the US ambassador to the UK has said the country should drop the defeatism over Brexit. Those comments are on the front of The Telegraph. The Metro leads with government plans to charge EU citizens £65 and answer 3 questions in order to stay in the country after the UK leaves the European Union. The Financial Times reports that the Bank of England's chief economist has voted to raise interest rates, sparking anticipation of an increase in August. The Daily Star reports that the late Sophie Graydon of Love Island fame had revealed that she was subjected to cruel taunts from online trolls. The 70th anniversary of the arrival of the Empire Windrush features on the front page of The Guardian, the paper calling the passengers on board the pioneers who changed Britain, and their main headline there about Heathrow expansion. So plenty of different stories there to discuss with political journalist Isabel Oakeshott and Evening Standard columnist Ayesha Hazarika. You've picked up the Metro, though, to begin with. They focus on the details announced today by the Home Secretary of what EU citizens need to do if they want to stay in Britain after Brexit.
It's quite simple, really. You pay £65 and answer a few simple questions, and there you go. And I've been trying to work out how they've actually come to this £65 figure and whether it's a kind of a decent sum for the amazing privilege of being here. And I don't know, it just seems like a bit of a bargain. What do you think, Ayesha?
Well, it's just good to see some policy coming out on immigration post-Brexit, because it is the big unknown, and immigration was like a huge fault line during the EU referendum campaign. And, you know, whatever the rows that various political parties are having, immigration is going to change afterwards. So I think it's good to have some detail. I also read that there's going to be an app that might be used, so that's quite interesting to see how the technology will work. But this is only the beginning of the conversation we need to have. I hope that Sajid Javid will be really ambitious and courageous and muscular as the Home Secretary. He already had a row with Theresa May when he was at the Department of Business about removing students from the migration cap and the migration figures. I hope that he will also persuade the Prime Minister to junk the kind of unworkable target of reducing migration to the tens of thousands, which everybody knows is you can't meet it. And I hope he'll take a more positive tone with immigration. We hear a lot of negativity about immigration, but our economy needs immigration. Immigration is good for our society. We can have controlled immigration, but we should have a more positive narrative around it.
So do you think this is a positive narrative, if you like, what's been set out today? Do you think that he's got it right as far as the different hurdles that have to be jumped are for...
The devil's going to be in the detail, but from this cursory glance of it, it looks like looks like quite a sort of sensible starting point.
Bear in mind, this story, if I've understood it correctly, is for people who are already here. So it's to have the right to remain here indefinitely.
That's right.
It's not about qualifying if you're coming in as a new arrival. I'm not in a ranty mood tonight. Otherwise, I would have interrupted you about 5 times about immigration.
Very pleased.
There are a few things that I agree with you on. And I think, you know, Brexiteers, those who supported Brexit partly or even mainly because they worried about immigration, are often kind of parodied as people who don't want any immigration at all or who are ridiculous about immigration. I mean, I felt very strongly about the need for controlled immigration, and yet I absolutely supported the recent measures that were announced on allowing more foreign doctors and nurses, and clearly we need that. Where I don't agree with you, Ayesha, is that we shouldn't have any target. I don't know whether, you know, what figure is correct, but I think that the Labour years of unfettered immigration clearly led to a lot of problems, and frankly, probably where we are now with Brexit, which you probably regret. I don't mean you personally were in any way responsible.
Je ne regrette rien.
But you're probably sorry that we're Brexiting.
No, well, look, I think on that, I think a lot of people, I think, are in the middle of where the immigration debate is. I think the immigration debate is often polarised as let everybody in or sort of close the borders. I think most sensible people are kind of somewhere in the middle. And actually, the reason why the target was just a very ill-advised thing is it's very difficult, and it's very difficult to set an arbitrary target. One idea actually that the Home Affairs Select Committee put forward, now they are cross-party, so it's not a kind of a Labour or Conservative thing. They went around the country talking to people. They did a lot of town halls. Actually, one of the ideas that came forward, which I think is quite sensible, is kind of having a sort of 2 to 3 year rolling plan where you talk to businesses, you talk to different sort of regions, you see what the seasonal kind of needs are. Because remember, there's parts of the country which actually need immigration. Take Scotland, for example, which has got it's got a sort of falling working population. Scotland would like to attract more people as immigrants to come to Scotland.
Quite interesting here, though. We've got a very different view from the Mail. We haven't seen this, but the very different perspective there, saying 3.8 million EU migrants allowed to stay here. I mean, it's a fairly typical, quite inflammatory headline there from the Mail, kind of suggesting these are extra people and they are people who are already very much settled here. But then this quite stark figure there of 600,000 more than estimated. And because we've only just seen that, I'm not quite sure what estimate they're referring to, but that just reflects just how polarised the debate is, and I'm sure as more papers come in tonight we'll see again some very different headlines.
Absolutely, and still questions of course for Brits living in Europe to find out what happens to them in future, and the question over it's such a big project, whether or not the computer systems can cope with the demand or other questions that are being asked. But let's move on to another story. Let's move on to the front page of the Telegraph next, because they have another Brexit story. And this is the US ambassador to the UK, calling on Britain to drop their defeatism on Brexit.
I like this story, actually, not just because I'm a Brexit supporter. I have just come back from...
All the French tonight.
I've just come back from...
I've just come back from France,
Well, I just came back from the States, and actually I did pick this up from people I talked to over there. They're all quite keen on Brexit over there, and they can't quite understand why the narrative coming out of all the media from the UK is that Brexit is a problem to be managed rather than an opportunity and an exciting thing to come. And I think that does point to a failure on the part of the government and the communications and the way that this has been handled in terms of our image on the world stage, which is not great at the moment.
Are there more Brexit supporting newspapers though than Remain? I don't think I've totted them up, but
I mean, it's a sort of funny calculation to do, isn't it? Because some of the biggest Brexit supporting newspapers are the bigger circulation ones. Yeah. So it kind of...
You look at market share, there are more sort of Brexity newspapers.
But what do you think as a Remainer when you hear that?
I just think the idea of the American ambassador just telling us to be much more optimistic, I'm sorry, that absolutely doesn't wash with me. When you look at what Donald Trump is sort of doing, and you look at the capricious nature of Donald Trump as well. Look, we will be on bended knee trying to get a trade deal with America. America has just declared a trade war on its closest ally and neighbour. This guy, this ambassador just telling us to sort of jazz hands and be really grateful about Brexit. I just don't buy it. And there is a lot of uncertainty about what lies ahead. And I think, forget the culture war around Brexit, there is a genuine kind of worry about what's going to happen to the economy. And I know Isabel will say, well, look, the Remain campaign, did Project Fear, and I agree that it was over the top, but there is, we don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Well, and in that spirit, let's take a look at the front page of the Times. It's a little unfair on you because I know you haven't had much of a chance to read it, but let's at least reflect on the headline. Airbus prepares to take flight. They're saying that the European aerospace company is set to become the first big manufacturer to pull investment from Britain after losing patience with Theresa May's stalled Brexit negotiations. I mean, clearly we can't confirm that, but if that's true, that is a worry.
Well, look, I know that lots of people are going to pounce on this gleefully as evidence of it all going horribly wrong and how Brexit's a big mistake. I mean, I'm not going to say this is a great look for us. It is a huge company. They have there are some quite big figures here about the jobs that they create and the value to the economy.
They're saying tens of thousands of manufacturing roles.
There's some detail here about why they're doing it, to do with worries that EU safety certifications will not be ready in time that they need. So look, I'm not going to pretend this is a great thing, but I think it will be disappointing to see lots of gleeful Remainers taking this example as a kind of symbol of where we're going. I don't think that's right.
Well, I'm certainly not gleeful about this. This fills
Good.
me with a lot of consternation. You know, look, we're a country which 10 years on from the global financial crash, wages still haven't risen. You know, the economy is just about trying to get back on its feet. Nobody wants to see, you know, a kind of slump and businesses moving away. I've actually been speaking to a lot of businesses. Recently, I was at a conference with these type of sectors, aerospace, petrochemical, nuclear. And what was interesting, they were not kind of party pre, they were not having a view on Brexit, but what they were saying very clearly, these are the things they're worried about. The lack of certainty is really, really bad for business, bad for your planning. What's going to happen with skills? Standards was a really, really big issue with a lot of these kind of companies, and losing out having that seat at the table. So I think the concerns that businesses, I know we don't like experts anymore, but when you have so many businesses like raising the red flag saying we're worried, I think we're mistaken to not listen to them.
We must take a pause there. Plenty to talk about, though, coming up after the break, including Melania Trump's unfortunate choice of jacket. We're going to be taking a look at that in just a moment. Welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview. With me tonight, political journalist Isabel Oakeshott and Evening Standard columnist Ayesha Hazarika. And we're turning to the front page of The Eye next, because their headline there, Commons pays out millions to gag staff. So what's this about?
We're just intrigued as to what it is that's happened, but obviously we don't know because they've been gagged. So we don't have a lot of detail on this, but 53 gagging orders costing 2.4 million used to silence employees. And I think the concern here is about transparency. At Westminster, we've had a lot of publicity in the last year, really pretty unfortunate stuff for the image of the Houses of Parliament, about the treatment of staff, particularly women, you know, kind of exploitative culture of the disempowered in Parliament. And I guess there will be a suspicion that behind those headline figures lie some pretty shocking stories of people who've been persuaded just to go quietly so that there's not any great embarrassment.
Well, yes, and transparency is such an issue across so many institutions now, isn't it? Given that years later we can unearth scandals. I mean, obviously, you don't know what people are being told to be quiet about, but are you worried about this?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I've been very vocal about all the things that Isabel has talked about, the culture of sexism and harassment and bullying in Westminster. And Westminster makes the rules by which the rest of, you know, the land has to abide by. They will be, you know, different select committees. People in the House of Commons will be saying to other companies, right, be more transparent on your gender pay, be more transparent yourself. It has got to practice what it preaches. You cannot have NDAs in Parliament. I think it's completely inappropriate. And if you can't talk about it, you never change the culture. Secrecy and sort of silencing of victims is the thing that allows this kind of toxic culture to be perpetuated. And Parliament still has a long way to go, but there has got to be an independent complaints system as well.
OK, let's move on. Front page of The Guardian. It's not their main story, but they've got a small story in the bottom there referring to a jacket that Melania Trump was seen wearing as she got onto a plane, which was taking her to a detention centre on the border, or near the border with Mexico, to go and visit some of the children who've been separated from their parents. She wasn't wearing it when she got to the detention centre, but it has caused something to
It is
storm,
all
isn't
we
it?
really wanted to talk about, isn't it?
It's the big story of the
I
day.
don't know, I just think it's pathetic, really. It's like something a teenager would wear. I think it's such a shame, because the story today was supposed to be about her doing something independently. She's not a First Lady that does a lot of official visits, which aren't with her husband, on the arm of her husband, very little actually being on the arm of him either. And actually it's been overshadowed by this stupid jacket that she wore. It's not even a nice jacket. I mean, it just looks like something of a, I don't know, like...
I mean, I am endlessly fascinated by Melania Trump, and I don't buy for 1 minute that she's had this sort of Damascene conversion and she's suddenly like Mother Teresa about these children. I think she's absolutely gone in eyes wide open. This is all PR to make her kind of wicked husband look better. And I think you know, House of Cards. No, well, I won't mince my words, but I think there's kind of like House of Cards mind games going on between the White House and the rest of the media, as there always is. And what Trump is brilliant at doing is just kind of throwing out sort of bombs to sort of distract the media and get us all talking about something different. And it wouldn't surprise me if she's kind of sort of done this deliberately so that we are all kind of moving away from talking about the horrendous
but does it not just
issue.
take away from the compassion that she was showing to the families when she was there, to have that message, I don't really care, do you, on her jacket?
I think it's like a double bluff. I think
mean,
it's the ultimate double
visit
bluff.
didn't sit easily with me because, I don't know, there's something that just jarred with me about the woman doing a very typically female visit. Couldn't she have gone to, I don't know, something on the military or something on something really hard business related or something, and instead it's the softy women for children thing.
But also, I just don't buy this kind of... I hate this type of politics where Trump says, you know, I decided to change the executive order because of my wife and because of Ivanka. He's not an emperor. He should not be kind of getting political advice from his wife.
I know, but all politicians do that. I mean, remember David Cameron did it.
Not to this level. Not to this level.
To be fair, Gordon didn't do it.
He doesn't take... Well, you know, a lot of the leaders I've worked for don't do that, and a lot of the leaders I've worked for have been women. Trump should be listening to women politicians who are elected in their own right, not just kind of saying, oh, I've done this because my wife and my daughter... I mean, look, the rate things are going, his daughter will be head of the FBI and running the Mueller investigation.
OK.
It's not even a joke.
It's not even a joke, is it? Cut to...
On that note, we must leave it. We'll have to visit the issue of moths and low-temperature washes. Stay tuned
You need to
at
know.
11:30. So we'll see you again. Thanks for the moment, though.